Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast, where we talk about films off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list of 2024. Probably should have put that before the explanation, but anyway.
Yeah, grammatically that was a weird construction.
Well, you know, that's what commas are for. My name is Clay. With me, as always, is Amanda. How are you doing, Amanda?
I mean, I'm being held together by copious amounts of cold meds and tea, but otherwise I am okay. How are you?
That's what you like to hear in early January, because if you don't have snow, at least you can have RSV.
Viruses.
Yes. I'm doing well. Had a nice New Year. We hung out New Year's and we watched Ghostbusters 2. We just us alone in a room. Everybody else was somewhere else.
That makes it sound way creepier.
It does. We weren't talking. We were just watching Ghostbusters 2 alone in a room.
This makes it sound like you a la A Clockwork Orange tied me to a chair and stapled my eyelids open and forced me to watch it.
It sounds like a New Year's Eve party I went to when I was like 11, where it was like an adult party, and me and the only other kid were in the basement just watching Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah.
Anyway, today we are jumping back into it. We're doing a heavy hitter here with number 6 on our list, which is Get Out. It has a 98% Rotten Tomatoes score with an 86% audience score.
Wow.
Had you seen this before?
I had, but I was kind of a latecomer to it. I think I watched it at some point in 2020 during lockdown.
Oh, really?
Alone in my house.
Just because you were trying to be antithetical to what the movie was asking you to do. You're like, no, I'm not going to leave my house.
I am
for a full
incapable
year.
of getting out.
Yes.
And so I must live vicariously through this movie about somebody trying to get out.
Yes.
Relatable content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. I saw this in the theater, and I have not seen it since then. Which it's weird because, you know, I was we can get into this as we get into it, but I was curious about the rewatchability of this. And when it started, I wasn't sure it was going to hold up, but then once everything gets going, it really drags you in.
Look, all you need to do is just be a giant nerdy English major like me. And then on your second watch through, you start to see all of these little symbolisms and these clever little things that you missed the first time. And you start going, I see what he did there. Oh, my God.
Yes.
So that's going to be me this whole time.
Excellent.
This whole
Excellent, because I am coming into this thinking that I am woefully underqualified to talk about this outside of the fact that, it's a good movie. So.
Oh, yeah. No, me too. I'm still going to do it, though.
Oh, excellent. Great.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a quick break and play the trailer for you, and then we'll get into it.
You got your toothbrush?
Check.
Do you have your deodorant?
Check.
Do you have your cozy clothes?
Got that.
What?
Do they know I'm black?
Should they?
You might wanna,
Mom and Dad, my black boyfriend will be coming up this weekend. I just don't want you to be shocked that he's a black man.
I ain't never seen you like this before, bruh. Meeting families and taking road trips. Don't come back all bougie, man. Come back, get your damn pants up to your damn stomach.
So you guys coming up from the city?
Yeah, we're just heading up for the weekend.
Can I see your license, please?
He wasn't driving.
I didn't ask who was driving. I asked to see his ID.
Call me Dean and you hug me, my man.
So how long has this been going on, this thing? We hired Georgina and Walter to help care for my parents. When they died, I couldn't bear to let them go. Do you smoke in front of my daughter?
I'm gonna quit.
She'd take care of that for you.
How?
Hypnosis.
I'm good, actually.
You ready for this?
I'm back in the beat.
So look, I go do my research. Apparently, a whole bunch of brothers been missing in this suburb. But it's cool. Bro, how you not scared of this, man?
Good to see another brother around here.
Chris was just telling me how he felt much more comfortable with my being here.
Get out.
Sorry, man.
Get out! Yo! Rose, we gotta go.
Is everything okay?
Rose, the keys. Just get the keys.
I don't know where they are.
Rose?
Sink into the floor.
Wait.
Sink.
Mine is a terrible thing to waste. Terrible thing to waste.
If there's too many white people, I get nervous.
No.
A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Okay, Get Out. Directed by Jordan Peele, written by Jordan Peele, starring Daniel Kaluuya, Allison Williams, Catherine Keener, Caleb Landry Jones, Lakeith Stanfield, Lil Rel Howery, Stephen Root, and Bradley Whitford, the actor, not the bass player in Aerosmith. And I honestly can't remember if I made that same joke in Cabin Fever. There's a high chance that I did. But
Oh, I don't remember either.
Amanda, what happens in Get Out?
Now that Chris and his girlfriend Rose have reached the meet the parents milestone of dating, she invites him for a weekend getaway upstate with her parents, Missy and Dean. At first, Chris reads the family's overly accommodating behavior as nervous attempts to deal with their daughter's interracial relationship. But as the weekend progresses, a series of increasingly disturbing discoveries leads him to a truth that he never could have imagined.
I kind of feel like that's a little bit underselling the fact that he seems like he easily could imagine it.
Well, I mean, if you're looking at this movie as like, if this happened in real life.
That's true. I guess
you're
his
not
buddy,
going to be.
His buddy could easily believe it, but maybe not.
Yes, if Rod were the main character of this movie, that synopsis would not have worked.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Well, Clay, some things you'll find in Get Out include death by taxidermy.
Yes, not since. I can't think of another. Oh, you know what? No, I can. Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. There we go. Not since Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 has someone been so spectacularly killed by a pair of antlers. Bradley Whitford not quite as equipped as what's her name? Linnea Quigley, though, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But win some, you lose some.
You'll also find death by bocce ball.
Ah, yes, death by lesser sport ball. What is what is the point of bocce? Is it like you hit the other ball out of the way?
Yeah, I think it's sort of like a shuffleboard kind of deal, right?
It's one of those games where
curling.
It's one of those games
it's a white person game.
Clearly they had nothing better to do, so a couple people threw some balls on the ground and then were like, yeah, we can make a game out of this, I think.
No, it's just like they didn't have the sticks for polo, so they just went,
yeah,
okay.
Sure, why not?
We'll do this instead.
Yeah.
You'll also find Childish Gambino.
Yes, I love the album that song is from.
It's so good.
It's one of those albums where it is not ripping off any particular song specifically, but it almost is, because it is a style lift to the very close to the point of plagiarism, but he does it impeccably well. It's a very good album.
Like it's done with intention and purpose. Like there's a reason he's doing it like that.
Yes.
Yeah. You'll also find aggressive calisthenics.
Yeah. Yeah. Pull a hammy.
Run right at you in the dark.
Yes.
Straight into your face.
Yep. Very easy to. I mean, you gotta stretch out the legs of your new body. When else can he do that other than middle of the night?
Really, really open her up. See what she can do.
Yeah.
Truly unhinged cereal eating.
I remember. I could be misremembering this, but for some reason I thought I heard that was Allison Williams' idea.
God, I hope so.
It was either something that she actually did in her real life or she witnessed somebody else do. Either way, unhinged.
Reminds me of, I had a friend who, when she studied abroad, one of her roommates would eat raw spaghetti.
Like hard spaghetti?
Yes, like uncooked spaghetti.
Why?
Because she was truly unhinged.
Was it like because it was crunchy? That's like, I've tried to do that. It's very difficult.
Clay, I cannot tell you. It is a sign of psychopathy.
Call her up and let's find this out on the air.
Get her on the recording, get her on the show.
Yes.
You'll also find questionable girlfriend.
Yeah, more accurate usage of that than we usually use. It's less facetious and more literal because she definitely is a questionable girlfriend.
Yeah, throughout the movie, you're not sure. You're kind of in this weird limbo about her for a long time. And the usual questionable parenting.
Yes, very gold star questionable parenting here.
Yeah. Because this one is also questionable parenting too, because like, I guess in their own way, they're providing for their kids. So it's not on like a crazy person scale. You can't totally write it off as just bad parenting, right?
Yeah. I mean, they seem to be doing pretty well for themselves. It is multi-generational though, because it seems to have started with Bradley Whitford's dad, I guess.
Yeah, grandma and grandpa.
Yeah, so Get Out, very good movie. As I said, I wasn't sure how it was going to hold up on rewatch because going into this the first time, I remember not having any idea what was going to play out. Like I remember the trailers being pretty good at keeping under wraps exactly what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so much of the first half of the movie is that tension of keeping you on edge because you're not really totally sure what the vibe is or where this is going. And then when they, drop the hammer on you, it all becomes sort of just like a roller coaster ride down for the rest of the remainder of the movie. But after the first couple scenes, that worry kind of went away. Like once they, the first scene with him and the girlfriend, I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough because but once they got to the family's house, I thought stuff really kind of clicked into gear, and it really does kind of grab you. And even if you do know what's going on, it's still pretty interesting.
Yeah, and like, obviously this episode is about this movie, so there's going to be a ton of spoilers, but to spoil one of the big things right off the bat, watching this movie for the second time, knowing about Rose. Yes. I was a little concerned that was going to take away some of the interest and some of the tension, because I remember the first time I watched this, I was really like, I cannot tell if this girl is also psychotic or if something has happened with her family while she's been gone.
Sure, yeah.
And so I had that kind of like, I kept going back and forth on her the first watch through, and then you get to the reveal where she's like obviously in on it with them. But I found it still really interesting because now when you watch it, you can read so much of what she's doing and saying as performance, and like knowing that she's lying to him and knowing that she's putting on an act. It adds like a layer to everything she's doing and saying that I find really interesting. Like Greg actually pointed out a great one where when they're pulled over by the cops on when they hit the deer and the cop comes and the cop asks to see Chris's ID, and Rose is immediately like, that's bullshit. You don't need to see his ID. He wasn't driving. When you watch it the first time through, you're sort of like, either she's a good girlfriend and she thinks she's standing up for him, or she's a crazy manipulative person and she's making a big performance out of being like, look what a good ally I am.
Right.
But Greg pointed out to me that he's like, yeah, also she doesn't want the cop to look at his ID.
Right, yeah.
She doesn't want the police to be aware that this person is in the area in case he does get reported missing later.
Yep.
And I was like, oh shit, I hadn't really put that fully together. even after, you know, when I watched it the first time and I thought back about it, but then the second time through, it really does add that layer of ulterior motive to everything Rose is doing throughout the first, you know, 2/3 to 3/4 of the movie, really.
Yeah. Yeah, she is impeccably written and performed, I think, as a character, because once they get to the house, you know, the dad obviously comes on pretty strong in his silly over the top allyship. But she is played so straight down the middle that it is even knowing that where it goes, she is so effectively believable. That it's just a really great performance and a really great turn from Allison Williams.
Yeah, I mean, and I think casting her is perfect.
Yeah.
Like she does both versions of this character, this sort of like really like relatable, nice, good girlfriend thing really well. And then when after the turn, when she's got her hair like aggressively slicked back.
Yes.
And she's in this like proto-Mormon uniform of like a white button down and khakis, and she's doing her little psycho serial killer cereal snack. She's so terrifying. She becomes like an automaton. She's like becomes the scariest character in the family.
Yeah. And I think my favorite thing from her is when Rod calls, or she calls Rod. I can't remember which way it goes. And she's basically doing the Terminator thing, where she is giving what she's saying is very emotionally intense, but she has a completely blank stare on her face, like completely unemotional. It's pretty impressive to be able to do that sort of verbal acting while keeping your face completely stone.
Yeah, especially in the eyes. Like her eyes are so cold and blank. It's really impressive.
Yeah. But yeah, I was watching this and trying. It's so good at skewering, just like the way that people try to be cool.
Oh yeah,
with black people. That I found myself thinking, like, how do we talk about this without just becoming that?
Well, I even have like on a slightly different note, but a similar worry about like how to talk about this movie without slipping into caricature.
Right.
I was like, there are going to be times while we talk about this where I use words like privilege and microaggression.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I know a lot of those words have become kind of like buzzy and weirdly like politicized, and I'm just using them because they have a utility of meaning in this context. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I feel like they inspire knee-jerk reactions from people now, and that's not why I'm using them. I'm using them because they're here in the movie.
Sure.
But yeah, it's I think this movie really makes you overly self-aware, especially as a white person, of like your word choice and your language choice and how careful we sometimes feel we have to be and how careful people sometimes aren't about how they express themselves. And I think that it does that on purpose because that is how Chris has to be all the time as well.
Right.
Like when he's around Rose and her family, he presents himself in a very different way than he does when he's talking to Rod on the phone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like when he tries to connect with any of the other black people you see in the movie, like he approaches them in a much more casual, he seems more comfortable immediately. And he even admits it at the party that, seeing another black man here makes me less nervous until they start talking to him like they're 92-year-old white people.
Yeah, yeah. And they do such a great job of presenting that stuff independent of the ultimate evil behind it, where it's just like the way that the father talks to Chris about his also, just for the record, I want to get this on tape, saying that some of my favorite movies are Get Out. I just want to make sure everybody knows that. Some of my best friends are the movie Get Out.
Yeah.
But the way
some of my best friends are Jordan Peele.
Yeah, I wish. He seems like a cool dude.
Yeah, he seems awesome.
But the way that they have the father talk to Chris in this sort of, hackneyed, I would have voted for Obama a third time if I had the chance. But then at the same time, they have black servants at the house. Mm-hmm. It's like that is even removed from the horror movie aspect. Such an interesting observation of things that very clearly obviously happen and might be might take more of a pointing out the weird hypocrisy of it than you would think.
Yeah, because I think sometimes there's this underlying attitude where if you're saying something based on stereotypes but it's complimentary, then it's not racist.
Right.
And I think this movie plays with that a lot. Like, you could be saying something with the intention that you're like, no, well, I mean, I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to say whatever. And your intention is like not enough in the total context of somebody's world to absolve you of any sort of like need to think more critically about what you might be saying and why.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just, one of the things I do love about that first scene in the house where, Chris has met everybody and the dad's giving him the tour, which is a very dad thing to do, is that he tells the story about his father who was at the Olympics, and he lost to Jesse Owens.
Right.
And it's this whole, like, it kind of right there, that anecdote immediately sets the scene for exactly what these people are doing and why, which is they want to claim the excellence and ability of black people for themselves.
Right, yeah.
Like, they want to be able to just sort of literally use their bodies and therefore take their achievements. It's really fascinating that he just kind of throws that anecdote in there, and it's one thing out of many, but if you don't pay a ton of attention to it the first time you're watching it, it can kind of gloss right over that he's literally saying, like, yeah, my grandfather lost in the Olympics to a black man, and he almost got over it, is what he says.
Right, yeah. And then
so this whole thing is like a revenge plot, essentially.
Yeah, and then they obscure the malicious intent by having him say the thing like, man, it was so cool to have a black dude up there just like sticking it to Hitler, which is like, that is absolutely something that I have probably said and not realized how ridiculous I sound saying it.
Well, again, it's one of those things where it's like the intention from a normal person, the intention would be good, but it's like, why are you saying it to this person? Like, he expressed no interest in being a runner or the Olympics or sports.
Right.
Like, why are we here?
Yeah. The one that I just think these characters are so like really, really well written and really well performed. And the one that stands out to me as being a great red herring, if you want to call him that, is the brother. Because the brother is the most aggressive of the family. But even there, the way that he is aggressive is, it has multiple layers to it, because when he gets weird about, MMA and sport, the one thing that nobody says in this movie that I was kind of surprised nobody says is nobody refers to Chris as being very athletic, but the brother comes the closest.
Well, doesn't one of the party goers gropes his muscles and talks about what a specimen he is? Yeah,
like they come very close to that. There's obviously different ways to say it, but that's the thing that always stands out to me is it happens a lot in wrestling, is they always, anytime that they say, this is one of the most athletic wrestlers we've ever seen, 99.9% of the time they're talking about a black wrestler. It's very weird.
Right, yeah.
But, the way that he is being weird about Chris's body type, and he's like, with a frame. He says, like, what does he say? With your frame and genetic makeup, you could be a real beast or something like that.
Yes, I want to come back to that line later.
Sure, which is a really shitty thing to say in general. But then once you realize he's talking this way because he's like coveting the idea of being able to use this dude's body for MMA sports himself or whatever. It's just... Right. I had this weird memory in the back of my head that he actually was a good guy, but clearly that's not true. But he's objectively false. Yes, he's really effectively drawn, I think, as being intense enough that he almost comes off as like a red herring to the situation.
Yeah, you start to think that maybe it's going to be just him, and maybe the parents are going to have given him a blessing to do some crazy weird shit. Like rather than the daughter, rather than Rose being involved as well. I do want to ask though, in the beginning, when Andre is abducted, the very beginning of the movie, is that Jeremy?
I think it's him, and it must be him and the dad, I guess, because Chris gets into that car, and on the passenger side of the car is the mask that the guy who abducts him is wearing.
Got it.
So it's at least Jeremy and somebody else.
Yeah.
Probably the dad.
Okay, cool.
Unless, I mean, it could be the gardener, Who knows?
True. Grandpa.
Yeah, but it's at least Jeremy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk about Rod for a little bit.
Sure.
So before we talk about Rod,
yes,
Jordan Peele is a very interesting filmmaker. Not only because of the subject matter that he makes movies about, but he is or was primarily known as a comedian. He was very integral in the creation of Gremlins 2. Among other things.
He's the Hollywood sequel doctor.
Yes.
What was it, Star Magic Jackson Jr.?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's correct. But yeah, he was the most well known for being the Peele half of Key and Peele, sketch comedy show that ran for a number of years. And when he sort of announced that he was making a horror movie, everybody kind of went, "What?" Because they just, I don't know if they directed that movie Keanu about the cat that they were both in, but that was like the first thing that they did after the show was over, I think. And then,
and that was a comedy.
Right, that was a comedy.
Yeah.
And then he goes off to direct, and he says he's making a horror movie, and he has talked extensively about his love of horror and stuff. And horror and comedy do occupy a very similar space very well if you can do it right. And so the tone of this movie is bonkers, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because everything is like except for Chris is a legitimate straight man, right? He's pretty serious.
Yeah.
His girlfriend.
There's a couple little throwaway lines here and there, but you're right. Yeah.
His girlfriend is pretty serious. Like, she is playing the liberal college girlfriend who's ashamed of the way that her parents are weird around her black boyfriend. Like, that's...
Yeah, she's the good white feminist.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
But everything else in the movie definitely has this amazing seesaw of humor and menace to it that is a tone that I think is incredibly hard to hit well. And like for a scene, let alone an entire movie. And he seems to do it impeccably well in this.
Yeah. Yeah, because like the dad and the brother are kind of laughable at different times, like whether intentionally or unintentionally, like you can just kind of chuckle at their behavior and some times where it's like really cringy or over the top. And then, I mean, Rod is hilarious.
Yes.
And also just kind of like that annoying friend who's also sort of right, even though he has no reason to be right. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, there were like a bunch of moments in this movie where I found myself laughing and then sort of being like, should I be laughing at this? I don't like it is objectively funny, but is it like ethically okay to laugh at this right now?
Yeah, it's a tone that I think he's kind of in certain places doing things that he knows is going to cause you to react that way. Yeah. Like, it is objectively funny, but he wants a part of you to go, ugh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, he wants you to laugh and then look around and wonder if everybody else is laughing next to you, or maybe they're now looking at you.
Yeah, totally.
But I find it to be an interesting choice. Well, I shouldn't say that, but Rod is straight up comic relief.
Yes.
And he is so big, but he doesn't seem out of place because everything else in the movie is pretty big when you really look at what's going on. Like, the amount of the amount of ridiculous awkward talk about black people and black bodies is in and of itself way over the top. Like, it's just like distilled down to a concentrate that I don't know. I hope doesn't exist in the real world, but it probably does somewhere. But
like the guy at the party saying to Chris, "Black is in."
Yeah, all the people all the people at the party acting weird. You know, it's all that stuff is very over the top, which means that Rod gets to go even bigger over the top because he needs to stand out as the actual comic relief. So you're watching the stuff at the party and you're kind of chuckling at the awkwardness of it, but you're getting legitimate laughs out of Rod.
Yeah, and it's like he's such a necessary character because it does break some of that tension in moments where you really need it. Like, where you need that catharsis of just being able to laugh, and to have somebody else point out to Chris how absurd what he's dealing with actually is.
Yeah.
And how far outside of acceptable, because it's clear that, like, Chris is doing everything he can to try and be a good boyfriend.
Yes.
Oh, my heat just kicked on. It's very loud. I apologize.
Stay warm. Heaters heating.
Thank you. But yeah, Chris is trying. He's trying to be a good boyfriend, a good guest, a good potential son-in-law, and I think he's also trying to be a good, quote unquote, good black person.
Yeah.
Like, in front of all these rich white people, he's kind of trying to play against type to them and, like, show them that their stereotypes are not true via his behavior. Like, he's trying to play it cool. He's doing his best to code switch in order to be palatable to these upper class white people who are all, like, judging him and making him feel real awkward.
Yeah, and I think that's something that they surprisingly don't specifically call out. Like, there's no scene where he's like, you don't get it. I need to act a certain way around like, that's just not something that is verbalized. Probably for the better.
The closest he gets is when he's trying to talk to Georgina. Like, he thinks maybe they can have a real conversation for a second. And he says, well, I just, I have to admit, I get nervous when I'm around this many white people.
Yeah.
And that's when she kind of has that break moment of, like, she almost says something to him and she starts to cry and she just keeps saying no for, like, a disconcertingly long time.
Yeah.
Which is such a scary scene when he's just, like, in the room alone with her and she's being so uncanny.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, I love that part.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the actual plot of what they are trying to do. Because, again, another thing that is, when you look at it, insanely over the top, because they are kidnapping black people in order to essentially brain switch with them and take over their bodies so they can use their bodies for their own purposes. Generally, older people or people with disabilities, like Stephen Root is blind and he wants Chris. You know, I wish that someone had said to him, you know, even if you're inside his body, you're not going to be a good photographer. That's not how that works. You'll be able to see, but what you like about his pictures is he has a good eye for photography. But you won't get that because you still have your brain and you're bad at art. That won't change.
That's a good point.
It's not like being able to run fast.
That's true. It makes it even more of like an insane waste.
It is. Yes.
Like it's even more just sort of objectifying a black person's talent.
Yes.
And saying, well, it's not really about you. It's because your build and your genetic makeup or whatever insane eugenicist bullshit. That's where the real ability is. You could put my brain in there and I'd be able to do it just as well. Like that's their whole stance, is that, you know, because in that creepy video, doesn't it even say, with our determination and your like physical talents or something, imagine what we could do. It's like some crazy bullshit like that.
I'm just trying to save the guy $20 million. Okay.
Well, I watching this through again and kind of having them lay out, what is it called? The coagula?
Yes. Behold the coagula.
Behold the coagula. That should have been one of the things you'll find. Behold the coagula.
Yes.
What they want is the most literal form of blackface.
Right.
Like, yeah, they want to take it even further, not just imitate, but actually be. And it is really interesting this very over the top kind of sci-fi procedure that they've come up with. It's both totally insane on the one hand, but then in the context of things that have really been done to people of color, it's kind of like, well,
sure, yeah.
In terms of like medical experimentation on the unwilling, it's not like it hasn't happened before.
Is it really that different than what what's her name, Marie Laveau, what she was doing in her murder torture dungeon in New Orleans?
Right, or the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Yeah, where it's like you just take unwilling black people and do medical experiments on them without their consent, or like without their informed consent.
Right. Yeah.
And not really giving them any choice. So it's kind of like it's presented in this movie as so over the top and crazy, but when you think about it just on the baseline conceptual level, it's like, well, yeah, it's actually kind of rooted in reality, which is one of the things that I think Jordan Peele does very intentionally with this movie. Is he's doing the same kind of thing that Margaret Atwood did when she wrote The Handmaid's Tale, which is they're taking things from reality, real things that have actually happened in the world, and then bringing them to the most extreme version.
Right, yeah.
And playing off of that, which is what I think makes it really successful in terms of its like creepiness and just general ability to like reflect some really grotesque things in society.
Yeah, because like if you really want to get literal about what's going on, these people aren't racist. They are at least not in the way that like would lead to a hate crime or a lynching or something. Like they don't hate black people. It's actually the complete opposite, where they just covet them so much that they are willing to do the most insane, awful shit in order to inhabit them. So
yeah, I think it's like, I don't know. I think it's a little more complicated than that because...
I'm sure. Yes, it is.
Well, yeah. Well, no, because my knee-jerk response to that was just, I don't think they think black people are that great because they don't care about their actual people. True. They just want the trappings of it. They want to own it all.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if that destroys the lives and minds and souls of the people that they are coveting.
Yep.
They want to they're re-commodifying them. They're trying to turn them from humans into kind of glorified like cars for a brain.
Yeah, yeah.
Where you can just swap in and out when you're bored of one.
Yeah, and that is the it is scary to see the way that they treat Chris and the others. Mm-hmm. Again, in this heightened sci-fi insanity, but like putting Chris on an auction block to sell to the highest bidder, science fiction element removed is not something that, didn't happen.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's take a moment of silence to remember that.
I'm skimming through my notes because there are moments in this conversation where it is kind of like, where do you go conversationally from some of this stuff?
Yeah.
Like where do you how do you transition from that into?
Well, I want to talk about Lakeith Stanfield a little bit. I think he's really great in this. I didn't know him when I saw this because I think this was probably the first big thing. I mean, as far as I know, anyway, it was the first big thing that he was in. But he was in Sorry to Bother You, and he's on Atlanta, I think, and he was in the Haunted Mansion movie that came out recently.
Oh, I still haven't seen that.
It's fine.
I keep meaning to, just sort of out of like childish nostalgia.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
if you're still sick and you're looking for a movie just to like throw on while you're cuddled,
very sick in so many ways.
Yeah, cuddled with a blanket, blowing your nose, you could do worse than the Haunted Mansion. But
now I have my plans for after we're done recording.
Yes. But he's really good in this because he does. I love the way that he plays his post-surgery character.
Yes.
Because he has just enough old man energy to the way that he like holds himself and talks that he is you're riding a line as to what is going on with this guy. Because at first you could be like, oh, maybe he's just brainwashed or something to be more quote unquote presentable or whatever. But then once you kind of know what's going on, you're like, oh, he's actually doing a pretty good job of playing an old man inside a young man's body.
Yeah. Like I love the scene where somebody, I think it's the Japanese guy asks Chris at the party, to describe to him the African American experience.
Yes.
And Chris, like, it's moments like these in this movie where I think about if somebody asked me, I don't know, some boring ass white woman equivalent of that was like offensive and not something you should say in public in front of all these people who then just kind of calmly stare at you waiting for you to answer as though it's a reasonable question. I feel like I would be so taken aback and so mortified that I would not know how to respond.
Yeah.
And Chris kind of like brilliantly just immediately is like, I don't know. Why don't we ask Logan? Like, puts it back on one of the weird partygoers who's kind of more in the in crowd. Like he deflects it so smoothly and so brilliantly onto this very bizarre character who then, does this kind of old man like, oh, well, let me think about that for a minute. And that scene is so uncomfortable, and yet his delivery of that little monologue is so funny, even as it's weird and creepy. I loved that scene.
Yeah, that scene is is a good one because I don't think most people have a good understanding of what it's like to be the only person like them in a group like that. Because you end up becoming the spokesperson for everyone like you in a way that is completely ridiculous. And it's you know, anytime something racially charged happens, there's always someone who's very wisely says, like, listen, I appreciate your interest in this, but I am not your Google. You know, I just because of my skin color doesn't mean that I know all the answers to the things that you were asking me. Which in and of itself is a weird crutch, right? It's a weird, and it's not just with black people. It's any instance in which, you know, there's one person who represents, is the sole representation of a group of people or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're like, you know, if there's one person from Germany in your group and you're like, so how do you feel about the Holocaust? And it's like, well,
right.
Well, first, it was bad. Let me get that out of the way.
Right. Let me just state that out front.
It was bad, and it definitely happened. Let me get those out of the
way. But yeah, and this movie, it really plays off of that sort of. I don't know how to, that sort of like accidental / casual racism of like typical of older generations, especially. Mm-hmm. Like, not all, we're going to be doing lots of not all whoever's right now. But that sort of stuff that you would with like your grandfather or your great aunt or whoever, they would say some stuff where you'd just be like, you can't say that anymore. Or like, that's not okay to ask people. And the sort of thing where your knee-jerk reaction when it is your own family, your own loved ones, is to sort of be like, well, they don't mean it that way. They don't know how it sounds. It was different when they were younger. Like all of those kind of, you try to excuse it, but this movie really shows you how it builds and builds and builds. It's like, it just happens when you're around people. Like, no matter what, if we just kind of keep brushing it under the rug and saying, oh, well, you know, My dad says he would vote for Obama for a third term, but he doesn't mean it in a weird way. He just means it in like a dad way. And you're like, well, no, but it is weird.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said for innocent curiosity, right? You know, if you don't have any experience, but you with a different culture and you have a representative of that culture in front of you, then yeah, you might ask a couple questions. But I think the trick is recognizing that they are not there to answer these questions for you. Like, that's not why they're there.
Well, yeah, and like, you can ask them about their specific experience.
Sure.
In like a normal and appropriate way, but you can't ask them to speak for all Germans or all black people or all gay people or whatever.
Right.
And also, like, hopefully it wouldn't be the very first time you met them.
Yeah. Well,
hopefully it wouldn't be like within 30 seconds of meeting them, you're asking them, have they ever thought about becoming an MMA fighter?
Yeah. Well, hopefully, but hey, you might not get another shot, so you may as well.
Feel up those muscles while you can, Clay.
Yes. We haven't talked about Catherine Keener at all. I think she's really great in this.
Oh my God. How have we not talked about her yet? She's so creepy.
Yeah. And she's creepy in a way that is just like, on the surface, the way that meeting someone's mom for the first time can be kind of creepy.
I don't know if that's how I would describe meeting someone's mom for the first time.
Well, you know, it's
kind of creepy.
Yeah, there's a certain intensity that comes, especially if it's only after 5 months, which is kind of insane, but
that is kind of insane. I did also have that written down. They've only been dating for 5 months.
That's like, I'm assuming they're both out of college, like mid-20s.
I think Rod says that Chris is 26.
26? Mm-hmm. So like 5 months is like nothing.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, now that I think about it, I had definitely met Greg's parents within 5 months of us dating.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I met my girlfriend's parents 8 years before we started dating, so I got to jump on
Negative
that
8 years into dating.
But yeah, she has that certain intensity, like the intensity comes through in the bit when they're sitting together in the room, and she says, "Do you smoke in front of my daughter?" Which is just a very like mom is getting not aggressive, but like she's putting you in your place pretty quickly.
Yeah, and the sort of like ownership over Rose, where she keeps saying, "That's my kid. That's my kid."
Right. Yeah.
I find the use of him smoking as kind of a symbol and a plot point really interesting too, because like, especially in like middle and upper middle class cultures now, smoking is kind of passé. Like, people don't smoke cigarettes. They vape or whatever.
Right.
But they don't smoke cigarettes. It's seen as kind of like a poor people thing now. And I think it's so interesting that they're so judgy about Chris smoking, but the dad admits he used to smoke too.
Right.
But they never, you know, they just say like, "Oh yeah, and then Missy hypnotized me and I was able to quit and it was so great." And it's kind of like, yeah, but they were so hard on him when they find out that he smokes, that it was just kind of a weird, yet another thing where they're clearly thinking more about his like resale value,
right? Yeah,
than his actual health.
Yeah, yeah. And this time, one of the things that I noticed that didn't occur to me the first time is one of the small details is that the parents, one of them is a neurosurgeon and the other one is a psychiatrist. And I didn't even clock that the first time. But as soon as they said it this time, I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that makes sense as to what they're doing then." The two most evil of sciences.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't realize that until I watched through this time, you know, when he's strapped to the chair in the basement and they show the video with the grandfather. The grandfather talks about how he has figured out, behold, the coagula. And then it shows at the end of that video, like, it shows them all as a family. And I'm like, oh, this is very on purpose. Like, these, Missy and Dean, whichever one of them, I think it's supposed to be Dean's father?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes, it is. Yeah, because it's the guy who lost to Jesse Owens.
Yes. You're right. But, like, they were probably kind of raised specifically to take on these jobs.
Yeah.
In the hopes of being able to perform the coagula.
Yes.
Like, it's a weird, like, eugenicist, like, breeding stock kind of thing where they have been raised specifically for this purpose.
Yes.
In their own family.
Yeah. What did you think about the hypnosis stuff?
I think it's so unsettling.
Yeah.
Especially the way it's handled in this movie, where it starts so subtle, and Catherine Keener does such a great job as Missy, like, riding that line between a comforting maternal presence and something really frightening.
Yeah.
And her prodding, she zones in so quickly, and I'm sure it's because Rose has told her where to push. At least on the second watch through, that was kind of my assumption. Like, she knows to go straight for, where were your parents?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, so your father was out of the picture. Where was your mother? And, like, she knows to keep prodding into that really horrific backstory right away, and to push him where he's most vulnerable. And I think she uses it to such great effect, like, as an actress, like the tension of her being sort of like soft, and she never yells. She's not aggressive, but he is clearly so unable to resist. And it's like really heartbreaking to watch him paralyzed in the chair and kind of breaking down and unable to stop anything. And I think the visual of him going into the sunken place and his vision becoming like a television is really poignant. And it ties it all back into that memory of the night his mom died, where he keeps saying, like, I just sat there watching TV. I could have done something.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's really, really well done.
Yeah, the backstory thing is the kind of element that usually I would kind of bristle at a bit, because it really is only, well, I don't know. It feels like it's only there as for the purpose of the hypnosis stuff. And then they bring it back a little bit at the end, when he attempts to save Georgina. But like, normally I would bristle at what feels a bit like unnecessary backstory, but I think they handle it pretty well here.
I think they handle it well because also the deer at the beginning is kind of an omen. It's kind of, when you find out later on that that's how his mom dies, is a hit and run, it sort of, at least for me, made me think that just being in the car when it hit the deer and seeing the deer suffering at the side of the road before he even got to Rose's family's house. Yeah. It's kind of put him in a vulnerable spot emotionally. Like, it's brought up all these memories, and just meeting a family, like meeting your significant other's family. You can't help but compare, like, your family and theirs. And so when you see what they have and you don't, and I don't really mean materially, I mean sort of relationship wise. And I think some of this hit me because, like, my dad died when I was a teenager. And so from then on, every time you meet someone else's parents, it sort of emphasizes the absence of a parent in your own life. Yeah. And so I think a lot of that actually really worked for me because it gives you a lot of insight into where Chris is mentally and why he might be trying so hard to get these crazy people's approval. Yeah. Is because he's kind of missing that family and those parent figures in his own life. And he has been since he was a kid. And so for him, this might feel like, I really love this woman. And if I meet her family and I get along with her family, maybe one day we get married and they become my family. And I finally get to have this place in the world that I've been missing. So I don't know. For me, I think it worked.
Yeah. And I think on a motivational level too, his biggest regret from that story about his mother is that he didn't move and that he didn't do anything, and he could have. And so when he's presented with that situation where he is literally strapped to a chair watching TV, he this time makes the decision to actually be proactive and get himself out of the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that the fate he is staring down is that biggest regret forever. Like, he would become paralyzed and only able to spectate in his own body for the rest of his life. And it sort of forces him, it would force him to be constantly and forever reliving that huge regret that he has.
Yeah. 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 The times that this stuff bothers me is when it's like non-ironically like the scene in Gremlins where Phoebe Cates stops the movie to tell about this horrible thing that happened to her. Yeah. Like, I hate that stuff because it always happens at the same point in the movie where it's like they've just escaped from the monster and there's a quiet scene and then someone's like, when I was a kid, my father used to take me fishing. And it's like, dude, I don't fucking care, man. I know that you're trying to build sympathy for these characters, but this is pretty hacky. But in this movie, I do think it is handled really well and feels very of a piece of everything else and intentional and purposeful.
Yeah, I would say the only time it kind of skirts closest, the time it skirts kind of close to what you're talking about is when he and Rose are sitting outside and he sort of brings it all up again just to her and kind of I think that's okay. I also kind of think this movie maybe would have been fine without it. Yeah. Yeah. That conversation, or like maybe a shorter version of that conversation. I think maybe if they lean too hard into it, I think that's the scene for me where they do.
Yeah, that's fair. we mentioned 5 months being kind of early to meet parents. At the point that he says, "I love you," I actually said too soon, Chris, because that seems a little fast for that. But
yeah, you gotta do what I do and wait exactly 6 months.
Yeah. Okay, so he was almost there.
Yeah.
The ending is pretty great. The way Chris manages to escape, putting the cotton in his ears, it's very clever.
Very symbolic.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the stuff where it's like you can write papers about this shit or classes about how he puts cotton in his ears. He kills the father using a buck horns, which was a slang term that they used for black men who were slaves who were on the auction block. Yada yada. Like it's all very valid, all very intentional. But I'm not the person to be talking about that stuff. But but yeah, it's just it's a great. I think Daniel Kaluuya as an actor, if he has one flaw, is that he is too good at being stone-faced. Because the way he plays this movie, I think he's perfect, and the way that he goes through that final sequence, very kind of cold and calculated, I think is great. Conversely, I did not think he was the best choice for Nope for that same reason, because he goes through that whole movie incredibly cold, for me anyway, that I thought. And I kind of think I needed more from the main character than someone who's just sort of like experiencing this stuff and not really emoting all the crazy shit that he's seeing. But yeah, we can talk about that if we ever get to Nope.
I was going to say, I feel like I'd have to rewatch Nope in order to know if that really worked for me or not. I don't know if I read him as quite as cold as you did at the end of this. I feel like he is, because you see him throughout this movie go through quite a range of emotions.
I guess I shouldn't say cold, but he's very internal. He's a very internal actor.
Yeah, that's fair. Because I do think, like, you see him laughing and having a good time with Rose at points. You see him crying. You see him get angry. And then I think at the end, he's just so desperate. Like, there's no time to, like, stop.
Yeah.
And have a big emotional moment, at least not through most of it. This is the point where I wanted to go back to the brother, Jeremy, saying to him, with your, like, build or whatever and the right training, you could be such a beast. And that line is so well played because it comes from a place of, like, envy, but it's very dehumanizing. It's like literally saying you could be an animal, but that is kind of what he's forced to become by the end of the movie. Like, he is forced to do beastly things. He is forced to into extreme violence just to survive. Like, he clearly doesn't want to do it.
Right.
Like, the first time he hits Jeremy with the bocce ball, even though Jeremy's been nothing but shitty and creepy to him the whole time, he hits him, and then you see the moment he hesitates before doing it again, where he starts to, and he kind of cringes, and then he does it. Right. And so I think it's such a well-placed kind of line earlier on that then comes to fulfillment at the end. And I think the whole, like, when he gets out of the house finally, and he's in the car, and he hits Georgina, and he has that moment in the front seat where he sits and he kind of struggles again with himself of, like, just leave her, you should leave her, and he can't do it.
Right.
Like, he has to bring her with him because he can't reenact essentially what happened to his mom.
Right.
But the end sequence when he gets out of the basement and he kills, like, when he kills the dad with the deer head, it's so good.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Like, it's such a great kill. It's like the shock on the dad's face, and using the taxidermy as a weapon is, like, very creative and just really well handled. While the brain surgery is going on in the other room, they've cut the top off the guy's head and they've dropped it in a trash can.
Yeah. Yeah, the way that they play the brain surgery almost comically as well. The way that he's just dropping the skull and the flesh of the scalp into just a bucket.
Yeah, it feels like 2 steps away from flesh for Frankenstein.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me a bit of The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror when they put Mr. Burns put Homer's brain into a giant robot. And he pulls his brain out and he puts it on his own head like a coonskin cap. And he goes, "Look at me, I'm Davy Crockett." Like it has the same kind of slight comical flair to it. Yeah, it's a great sequence. And, I think also the way Kaluuya's internalization works really well is in that whole sequence, he's not scared. Well, he might be scared, but more so than being scared, he's angry. And he's kind of, like you said, he kind of turns into an angry animal, in a way that's very satisfying to watch. And it ends.
Yeah, because like these horrible people are getting their comeuppance.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it ends with a fake out that I know when I saw it, I and the entire theater totally bought when the car shows up with the red and blue flashing lights. The whole theater went,
"Oh my God."
Oh,
I had to like bite my tongue so hard. We watched it the other night because Greg had never seen it.
Oh, he hadn't seen it. Oh, cool.
No, so he was just like, that's part of the reason, usually when we watch these movies, you and I are chatting and he'll pop in and out, and sometimes a couple of our friends will too. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason he wasn't in the chat at all was because he had wanted to see this movie and he didn't want spoilers.
Yeah.
Because he somehow went in totally blind.
That's great.
Yeah, so I could like kind of feel him like tense up a little bit at the end, like no. I wanted so bad to be like, no, it's gonna be okay, I swear. Because
you don't know, like at that point, you don't know how wide the circle goes, right? Like you don't know if this is just this family. I think this is
just
go ahead.
Like just even if they're not part of the circle, if the cops show up and he's standing there,
of course,
and there's a dead body on the ground and a white girl who lives up the road begging for help. Like, whatever she says he massacred my family. They're probably going to believe her.
He sure looks like he did.
Yeah.
I mean, he did.
Because he did.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think this is one of the last things I wanted to get into was how effectively this movie gives you just enough to get you over the finish line as far as information about what's going on, but doesn't I think it's a really good narrative cone of vision movie where it has a definite idea of what the boundaries are that it doesn't want to go outside of. And so there are a lot of questions that you could ask, but this movie answers just enough of the questions that you don't spend the movie going like, well, so is it the whole town? Is it the whole state?
Right.
Like, where do these people come from? How long have they been doing this? And it's the exposition about all that stuff, I think, is handled really, really well. In a way that is one of the reasons why. Did you see Us?
No, not yet.
Okay, well, I won't go too into it, but my biggest disappointment with Us was I think that they explained too much, and it really kind of killed the whole thing for me. But we'll get there eventually because that's like number 10 or something on our list, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Where is that actually? It is number, I don't know. It's on there somewhere. But yeah, I think they handle that stuff really well. They give you drips of it. There's drips of stuff that they explicitly explain, but there is so much that they don't explain that they just let you kind of come to your own conclusion about. Him finding the pictures of Rose and all of her other boyfriends that she's done this to, I think is a really good bit of, they're giving you some information, but they are not giving you the whole story. Like you are,
right.
It's up to you to kind of extrapolate that out and what that means and how you think that plays out.
Yeah, it gives you enough to know that Rose lied to him, but maybe not quite enough to know exactly why.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And like...
Well, I was just going to say, because, you know, it's funny because seeing it a second time, when he gets to the picture where it's Rose and the gardener.
Yep.
I was thinking, wow, I'm surprised that they just laid out the whole game there, because after that scene, he's not playing it as though he has just discovered discovered that she is an evil force. Like he's still, at least outwardly, believes in her up until the point where she pulls the keys out.
Yeah,
but I was just gonna say, but I was wondering, like, if you haven't seen it before, I couldn't remember having not seen it before, if seeing that picture makes you go, oh shit, she's evil too, or if it just makes you go, oh, she was lying. It's weird that guy's there. What's going on, you know?
Yeah, I think for me it was more of a, I mean, there was an oh shit, but it was also what's going on.
Sure.
Like, clearly she is playing some part in this, whatever this is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're still not fully clear, I think, in that moment of what they're actually doing. Like, you maybe you probably could have guessed by then that they're sort of using their bodies, but you don't have the full picture quite yet.
Right.
But just going back to Chris's reluctance to kind of turn on Rose, I think it sort of speaks to the fact that he really genuinely loves her, or who he thinks she is. And that, you know, goes to the ending confrontation where it's Rose with the shotgun in her, you know, her khakis and her, you know, her little hunting outfit or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, she like sicks Walter on him like a hunting dog.
Yeah.
And then when Chris uses his phone flash to give Walter a moment of freedom, and Walter shoots her and kills himself, Chris has the opportunity to finish her off, and he can't do it.
Right, yeah.
Like, he looks at her and he still sees the person he loved. And I think it speaks to, like, the fact that he is inherently, like, a gentle person. This is not him. Like, this violence was not something, like, hiding in him all along that he wanted to enact. It kind of highlights, like, he has really been pushed to this point. This is not who he wants to be. And I think that's what makes Rod coming and rescuing him at the end so satisfying. Because it gives you that relief. I think it would have just been such a downer if they had gone with the this really is the cops deal.
Yeah.
And he had actually gotten either arrested or shot or whatever. Like, sadly, I think at the time, especially around which this was coming out, that was maybe too common of an occurrence. Like, it was almost like too realistic if they had gone that route.
Sure.
And like allowing him to live to be the hero is the more subversive ending than just making him kind of another in a long line of victims in the movie.
Yeah, that would have been way too dark. Like you know, this movie is, while it is shining a light on all of this stuff, it is ultimately about someone who prevails over it. So that, that would have been, that would have been a huge downer.
Yeah. It would have just been, I think it would have been too much of a bummer.
Yeah.
Like that would have put it up there with bummer endings, like the ending of the movie The Mist.
Oh yeah.
Where it's just like, oh man,
it's fucking brutal.
This has gotten too fucking dark for me.
Too bleak. A little too bleak.
Yes. So I'm really relieved. I feel like I've read somewhere that was the intended ending, and people kind of reacted so like, oh no to it.
Yeah.
That they went with the slightly more hopeful ending, which I'm grateful for.
Like, you know, I think that works in something like Night of the Living Dead, because it's like part of the story is the bleakness of what's going on and the inescapable nature of the monster, which is just as much man as it is the zombies in that movie. Whereas here it's just there's too much of hopefulness. Like watching Night of the Living Dead, you never feel hopeful that anyone's going to get out of that,
No.
None of those movies. No. You never feel like someone is you're rooting for them, but you know that this is it's going to get them eventually if it doesn't get them now. But with this, it would have been just too dark. I think for a movie that is serious, it is tonally serious, but is also tonally light. I think that would be way, way too dark for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, because like you were saying earlier, like Jordan Peele does such a good job of playing with that tone and sort of keeping you on your toes a little bit. So like when you hit the points where you expect the really bleak ending or the really bleak part, he surprises you. And I think this ending keeps with that tone really nicely. I think I also really like that it plays with, this whole movie plays with the sort of stereotypes about horror movies where, like especially in slashers, they always say like the black character dies first.
Yep.
And in this, he does not. He is the only survivor.
Right.
And not only is there no white savior, there is actually a black savior who comes
That's true.
And rescues him at the very end.
Yeah.
So it's this kind of nice, like, flipping those stereotypes on their heads and letting the movie end on a positive note.
I don't want to be that guy.
Uh-oh.
But
time for Clay to be canceled.
I've already lined up my appearance on Hannity. Don't worry, everybody. I'm really curious where the black guy dies first stereotype comes from, because I feel like at this point I have watched a lot of slasher movies and I don't think generally that's the case. And one of the reasons is because there doesn't tend to be a lot of black people in them.
Yeah.
But when there is, I don't feel like that is always like I haven't noticed it enough in these movies we've been watching to be like, oh yes, I understand the stereotype. It's always so I'm curious when it became such a perpetuating stereotype. And maybe I'm wrong. I could be completely wrong, but it's just that's one of those things that people always say that I have not personally noticed to be accurate.
No, but I mean, it's an interesting question because now that we're talking about it, it kind of reminds me of something we talked about a lot when we did our Friday the 13th series for the Patreon, where the sort of conception that in slasher movies, if you had sex, you died.
Yep.
And that was the direct correlation. It was something about being sexually active meant you had to be quote unquote punished. And so you were killed. And a lot of the movies we watched kind of actually play against that.
Right.
Or
yeah, exactly.
Don't really care much about it. Maybe some characters have sex, maybe some don't. That's not the reason they're at risk, though.
Right. Yeah.
So I wonder if this is kind of a similar one of those things where it's become sort of a stereotype or a trope in like the popular imagination. But on a practical level, it's actually not as prevalent as you might think.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if it's not a cliche that was created by people who just assumed that was the case because they give these movies such little credit.
Yeah, maybe. And they lump them together, so if it happens in one, you just sort of assume it must have been one of those slasher movies, therefore all of them.
Right, yeah. I mean, just going through the Jason movies, the black characters in those movies don't die first. They make it pretty deep into the movies. But
they do die.
They do. Oh yeah, well, everybody dies. You can't. One of the things we definitely noticed in Friday the 13th is you cannot have a protagonist who is anything other than blonde and white in those movies.
Yes.
But the guy who gets his head punched off in part 8 is one of the last guys to go. The guy from
I forgot about that.
The guy from Return of the Living Dead in part 5 is like somewhere in the middle, I think. And like that those ones specifically, it stood out to me where it's like, oh, I don't tend to see that this thing is actually the case, but who knows? I could be wrong.
Yeah. But it is definitely something that people say. So
yes,
I think it's fun to kind of play with that expectation that we have sort of inceptioned into our own imagination about horror movies.
Right. Yeah. Oh, the one other thing I wanted to say about that, the scene where Rose turns, is I think the other thing that's great about that scene is that I think at that point Chris knows that she's evil. But what he's doing in that scene is hoping against hope that she's not and giving her a chance to not be.
Yeah.
In a way that is just, I'm so glad that they never call it out or anything, because it plays so much better that way, where you can feel the desperation in his voice, like desperately hoping that his girlfriend is not what he now kind of believes her to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just really great. This is a very well written movie, very well directed movie. It definitely deserves to be on this list. I don't know if it deserves to be number 6. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, the reason why I don't know if it deserves to be number 6 is because this is one of those movies where conceptually the things it's dealing with are scary.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like kidnapping and human experimentation and having your body and your free will ripped away from you, and people not being who you think they are, and being like all the psychological manipulation stuff is terrifying when you think about it. But there aren't many moments in this movie that are like knee-jerk scary.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I would still probably keep this in the top 25.
I was thinking like between 25 and 30 probably.
Yeah, I don't know. That would be reasonable to me. I think this is one of the movies that gets a lot of credit because of the impact it had on the perception of the genre, because it drew in people who aren't usually horror movie fans. And it's one of the rare movies that got real critical acclaim.
Yeah.
Like one of the rare horror movies that got real critical attention and praise, which doesn't, it happens a lot more now than it did for a while there.
Yeah. They created a new term for this bullshit that makes people think it's okay to acclaim it because it's elevated, Yeah.
Elevated horror.
Yeah, it's silly.
But like, when did Hereditary come out?
Hereditary is from...
Is that like 2014?
2018.
2018. Yeah. So this was before that.
It is a year before.
Wow. Because we've probably talked about this before, but I'm trying to remember, like, where did that sort of like prestige horror kind of emerge?
I feel like the first one was The Babadook, which is 2014.
Okay. Maybe that's the one I was thinking about then. But yeah, this movie is kind of a part of that initial couple years where it was like things like The Babadook, maybe The Witch.
Yep. Babadook and It Follows were both 2014.
Wow, It Follows was that early too.
Yeah. And The Witch was 2015.
Okay.
So yeah, it feels like it was the 1-2 punch of Babadook and It Follows were the ones that really kind of kicked it off.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it was like you could admit that a horror movie could also just be a good movie.
Yes. Yeah.
And I feel like maybe that's part of the mass appeal of this movie, is that even if you don't like horror movies, this is a good movie. Like it's beautifully put together. It's extraordinarily well written. The details, the kind of, like, we've gone into a lot of the symbolism and the different layers and beneath things. Like you said, at the top. The characters are great. They're really well acted. So I think this one just has like so many quality elements as a movie that even if it's not the scariest horror movie, it's going to end up towards the top of the list regardless.
Yeah. I do also just love that this is a movie that's been so widely acclaimed by people who usually look down on horror movies. But when you get down to it, the plot of this movie is the schlockiest 1950s bullshit sci-fi horror you could think of about a brain transplant, you know?
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I am worried about Jordan Peele.
Oh no, personally?
Yes, he hasn't been returning my calls. I'm worried that he's going to get Shyamalan, where people are going to expect every movie he makes to be culturally important and heavy, and eventually he's going to, I assume, want to do other stuff. And I think he's probably a better filmmaker than Shyamalan, but I hope that he manages to not get too pigeonholed as ironically, like as the guy who makes the black people movies. You know what I mean? like it's because I feel like there's the danger of that, where it's like he has tackled in his first 3 movies such sort of big questions that hopefully he doesn't get pigeonholed as someone who only tackles those questions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, I know we said earlier we'll get more into Nope when we actually cover it, but I feel like the reaction to the movie Nope was relatively lukewarm, if I recall.
Yeah,
a lot of folks didn't really like it too much.
I didn't love it.
I thought it was like fine.
Yeah, I want to.
It's been kind of a grower on me. The more I've thought about it, like in retrospect, the more I like it. So I kind of wonder how that's going to hold up in my head.
Yeah,
on a repeat viewing.
I don't think it's on our list, but it might be worth doing as a wild card at some point, because I want to watch it again, because it was not clicking with me at all, and having seen some people talk about it since then, I was like, okay, well, maybe there's a lot that I missed or whatever. But so I've been interested to see that one again.
I will happily keep it in my back pocket as a wild card.
But before we do that, is there anything else you wanted to hit before we round it out?
No, I think I'm about good.
Well, before we get to our next wild card, so actually technically we should be at our next wild card, but Amanda will be leaving us for 3 episodes because she's going on a crazy cross the world vacation for 2 months. So we're going to be reshuffling things a little bit. So our next movie, I've hit the randomizer button, beep, boop, 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 and we will be moving up 1 slot to number 7. We'll be talking about Psycho, which should be very fun. And then we're going to do, after that, we're going to do one more with Amanda before she leaves, and then Wes will be joining us for the next wild card. And then my cousin, who runs a film noir. Well, I can just tell you what we're going to be doing. So we're going to be doing Psycho. And then after Psycho, we're going to be doing Reanimator. And then after Reanimator, Wes will be joining us for Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 to round out the Elm Street series. And then my cousin, who runs the film noir website Shadows of Noir, he has his own podcast where he talks about film noir movies. He's going to be joining us for Night of the Hunter. And then Wes will be back for one more where we're either going to do One Cut of the Dead, which is number 8 on our list, or something else he wants to do if there's another movie that he would rather do. And then after that, we have our 100th episode. So we'll be waiting till Amanda gets back before we hit number 100, which we have to figure out what we're going to do. I don't even know what it's going to be.
Goddamn.
But.
Yeah. We'll have to plan something.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, maybe we'll just talk about Barbie or something. I don't know.
We'll do Barbenheimer.
Anyway,
4-hour podcast episode on not a horror movie for our 100th episode.
If you are a Patreon subscriber, first, thank you. But
Thanks.
Secondly, do not worry, because we won't be missing any Patreon episodes when we cover Halloween this year, because that would be just like Amanda to be like, let's do Halloween and then leave for 3 months. So
then fuck off to South America for 2 months. That does sound like me. Irresponsible, frustrating, high maintenance. All of the above.
So if you want to follow along with us as we go down the rabbit hole of the Halloween series, you can head over to patreon.com/the Penske File. You can catch up with our coverage of the Video Nasties from 2023, the second string of Stephen King from 2022, and the Friday the 13th series from 2021, and you can tell me how wrong I am about how all of these movies kill the black guy first. But thank you guys for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Clay.
We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.